am Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. This valuable time is for you to pause in your day and go on your own self-journey. Discover the beliefs that are holding you back from living your best life at work and at home. Learn from the guests on this show as they share their inspirational stories on how they found ways to break internal beliefs that were no longer serving them. Because if you believe you can, you will. And our podcast begins now. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I interviewed Tashia Batstone, the Senior Vice President for External Relations and Business Development of the Chartered Professional Accountants of Canada. She is responsible for providing strategic direction and operational oversight to the leadership teams of pre-certification education, research, guidance, and support, member development and support, international and corporate citizenship. Her key role is in expanding CPA Canada's stakeholder relationships in Canada and internationally, developing business opportunities within existing and new channels, and promoting market brand activities to enhance the vision of the CPA as a preeminent, globally respected business and accounting designation. Ms. Batstone has been appointed as technical advisor on the International Federation of Accountants Board and serves as a member of IFAC's Technical Advisory Committee. She oversees CPA Canada Foresight, Reimagining the Profession, a comprehensive multi-stakeholder initiative designed to shape the future of the accounting profession as it adapts to these global trends, including technology, economic, environmental, geopolitical, and societal shifts. In addition to her professional activities, Ms. Batstone is the vice chair of the board of the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts, and a member of the audit committee of the Anglican Foundation of Canada. My interview with Tashia centered around her career journey and the advice that her father gave her along the way that helped to shape it. She has been able to put family first as she has taken on roles of responsibility and still achieved her dreams at the same time. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs. And today I'm with Tashia Batstone. And Tashia, do you want to give a little background on who you are and where you're from?
Sure. Mine from CPA Canada. So CPA Canada is a professional body representing 220,000 accountants in Canada, making us one of the largest accounting bodies in the world. We really focus on influencing and enhancing the relevance and the value of the Canadian CPA profession. My role here, as I said, is in external relations and business development, which means I'm responsible for our pre-certification programs, our member development and supports, and a lot of our research and knowledge development.
Great.
So I'm right now during the pandemic in Newfoundland, actually. Although I have a place in Toronto, and I'm in Toronto, I'm coming to you from St. John's, Newfoundland.
Oh, wow.
Where I'm spending the days, very long days these days.
I am so bad with geography. You have to tell me where exactly that is.
Well, it's an island on the east coast of Canada. So it's about a 4-hour flight from Toronto.
Okay. And so is there any significance to being there?
Yeah, it's funny, we were talking about my story a little bit. So I grew up here. I've lived here most of my life. And then, different times, different opportunities present themselves. So about 8 years ago, I moved to Toronto to take on the role with CPA Canada. But my husband and my children decided that they weren't ready to move to Toronto. So I've been commuting back and forth between Newfoundland and Toronto for the last 8 years.
Wow. So the pandemic's kind of a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, it's been different. It's different. My husband is saying he thinks we could live together again, which is a good sign. But we'll see how that goes.
Great. Awesome. So maybe you can start from your beginnings. We always like to get into the story behind how you actually took the path to where you are today. So you said you grew up in Newfoundland. So
well, I came from a pretty small family. I have, my mom and my dad. My father was actually an accountant, and so kind of got the starts, I would say, there. I have one brother and my mom. My mom was working in healthcare as well, but spent a lot of time taking care of the family. which was, and you know, that really shapes your values, right?
Right.
She was very, very engaged. You know, she was a great mom, engaged with the family, engaged with the kids, and my dad spent a lot of time working, and you know, it was probably the very traditional style of family life. And so, but it does shape your perspective. So I went to university here, and then decided to pursue my accounting designation, which I did. And I think for me, you know, when you look at your career path and what grounds you, and you spend a lot of time as you get older, sort of thinking back as to what drove you. And for me, I've always had a real strong sense of curiosity and a need, and I take great pleasure from teaching and sharing my learnings with other people. And so when I finished my accounting designation, I was working in a public accounting firm, and just really wasn't making me feel fulfilled.
Yeah.
And so I had an opportunity to go back to the university that I had gone to and done my degree, to teach at the university and to become an academic. And that's what I did. I chose to leave sort of the for-profit world and go back into academia, and spent the next, you know, 15 years of my career teaching, researching, and really enjoyed it. It was, you know, and it was also very good because it had a lot of flexibility. So I had a young family myself by that time, and it allowed me to work my schedule around my, you know, my children, and making sure that I was there and home for them when they needed me. And so it, you know, it just overall was a really good opportunity. But then, you know, probably about 15 years ago, I sat back, and, you know, you take these pivot points in your life, I think, where you sit back and you sort of say, okay, is this where I want to be for the
Right.
next stage of my career, the next stage of my life? And I decided that I wanted to really try something different. And so I moved into the professional association, and I took a job as a CEO of a regulatory body here in Newfoundland. And then decided to ultimately, when the opportunity came up, to move up to the national office to take on that position. But it was funny because when I moved to the national body, I took on the role as vice president of education. And so, you know, kind of went back to my roots to some extent, building
Yeah.
up, you know, this love of teaching and about sharing knowledge. Stayed in that role for about 5 years. It was around the time that we had unified the accounting profession. So we'd gone through a big merger in Canada of a
So
number of.
maybe you can explain a little bit about that.
Yeah, in Canada, the way that the accounting profession was organized, it was with three different accounting organizations. And ultimately, we felt that, you know, given the size of Canada, it didn't make sense to have the profession fractured across three different bodies. So in 2011, 2012, we went through a unification process, which was massive in its intensity.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I played a role in that, both from the perspective I was still working in Newfoundland at the time, at the start of the merger discussion. So did a lot of the coordination of the merger activities here in Newfoundland. But at the same time, I was transitioning to my role within education. And, you know, a big part of the new merged profession was the development of a new education model to educate professional accountants in Canada. And I had the opportunity to work with some really, really bright and amazingly talented people to head up the development of that new program. So we spent, you know, 3 to 4 years building that program. And then, you know, again, you get these pivot points in your life, right? I really enjoyed my time building the new program, designing what education was going to look like. But it got up and running, and it was, you know, it was sort of, my job there was done. And so I approached my CEO at the time, and I said, you know, I'm looking for something more, something different. I want to expand my portfolio. You know, just wanted. I think it's important as you go along to signal that you're ready to take on more responsibility. You know, that's always, whenever I mentor somebody, I always tell them that that's a good thing to do, is to reach out and signal to the people that you're working with that you're, you know, you're willing and able to do more. So, you know, we talked a lot, and eventually I moved into the executive vice president, or the senior vice president role that I'm in now, and, you know, far more larger span of responsibility. So, and it's been really interesting. It's a really exciting job. Get to travel quite a bit. Well, traveled quite a bit prior to last merger.
Exactly.
Worked with a lot of global accounting bodies, a lot of really interesting people around the world, built some really interesting partnerships and relationships with the profession globally, and have thoroughly enjoyed the work that I've done. So it's dynamic. It's no 2 days are the same, and it certainly keeps you engaged.
Yeah,
So
I definitely
that's my
think
journey. Yeah.
there's two different types of people, that some people are good at maintenance and some people are good at like come in for the project, fix it and move on, which I'm the second.
Yeah.
Where if I get in maintenance mode, I get like almost claustrophobic where I'm like, so I'm actually more turned around. So it sounds like you like the challenges of,
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. I love, transformational change is what I
Mhm.
love to do. I just recently, about 2 years ago, I started a program at CPA Canada. It's called Foresight. And it's really thinking about sort of what the next iteration of this profession needs to look like with respect to, what is a role that accountants, professional accountants are going to play into the future. How do we incorporate things like ESG and data and digitization, and what does that mean for professional accountants in Canada and around the world? And so it's been a fascinating project to work on that, again with some incredibly bright and dedicated people, really sort of thinking about what is the future and what are the possibilities. So yeah, it's exactly right. It's that opportunity to build and transform that really, I would say, gives me energy, right?
Well, and it's important to know who you are, because we always need the maintenance people, right, for the programs that are put into place, but not trying to push yourself in one bucket or the other when it just doesn't fit. You have to hire the person
Yeah.
that's opposite of you, right?
Yeah, you do. You've got to have a really strong. I've got an amazing ops team, like operational team that does all of the day-to-day magic of making
Hmm.
everything work and happen. But I really do find that, the most satisfaction is sort of thinking to the future and planning and that strategic visioning element of my role.
Right. So I want to go back to your dad. So your dad was a chartered accountant in a public accounting firm. Is that what he did?
No, he
Or
wasn't actually a professional accountant, but he was
okay,
he was a CFO of a
okay,
hospital board. So he worked in the public sector in the
okay.
yeah, in a hospital board.
And what was your interactions with what he did? Did you ever go to work with him? Did you ever
Oh
see
yeah,
what
and
he
it was,
did? Okay.
yeah, and he was very proud of what he did, and he had a really really strong work ethic, but at the same time he was very focused on his family. Both of my parents had family first.
Hmm.
That was always, you never question where their priorities were, um, and but at the same time, he was somebody that I admired greatly. I learned a lot from him. He passed away very young, and you know
When did he pass away?
he passed away when he was about 62.
Oh,
And,
okay.
so that was fairly young,
Yeah.
by
Hmm.
today's standards. And, it's funny because you still miss him every day. There's so many times when I do something, or I'm getting to meet a really cool person,
Yeah.
or, you're getting to just do some really interesting work, or traveling to parts of the world that sometimes I see him sitting there on my shoulder saying, I'm proud of you. And other times I see
Oh,
him sitting on my shoulder, I feel him sitting on my shoulder and say, you're working too hard, you're doing too much, you're not taking care of yourself. But it's kind of nice to have it there. But he was a really interesting man, and really liked to share what he did. And I never went into being a professional accountant. He didn't inspire me to be an accountant. I was planning on being a lawyer. I went to university with full intentions of going into law, but took my first accounting course and absolutely just fell in love with it. And it's funny
mhm.
because I don't even do a whole lot of accounting actual work right now. But
Right.
I still, when I get down to, my husband has a small business, and when I get down to, even taking care of his books sometimes, if the accountant's not available, it's just that kind of fun getting back into the basics, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I
Yeah.
think you have to have a passion. You have to have a passion. You have to find your spot. I always say to my children, you find what you do, what you love, because if you do what you love, you will be successful because you'll
Hmm.
put passion into it, and people will see that passion every day. That's the message that I was always given growing up. And, I hope that my children have gotten that message through as they go into their careers.
Yeah, for sure. So it's funny, my just like you. So I didn't know, my grandfather died when I was 3, but the story of my grandfather lived around me my entire life, and he was an original CPA. So he was a CPA in 1935 in
Wow.
the United States. So it's funny when you say that about on your shoulder, because sometimes I do some things and I'm like, it's too bad I never knew him, because how cool, like, I mean, he was in the very beginnings of public accounting before there was ever the FASB and, all this stuff
It's really
that,
interesting. Yeah.
SEC and, so he went through all
Yeah.
that transformation, and AICPA was really just developing. So I always think that too. I'm like, it would be so cool to sit down and talk, like if you could.
Oh,
Like,
yeah. I often think about that with my own kids. I wish they had known their grandfather, because I think he would have been, he would have made just such a big difference in their lives, right?
yeah, yeah. But people live on, I think, in the deeds that they do, and
Yeah.
and how they pass on, and obviously he's living on with you, which is cool because it brings more meaning to the work you're doing, because you kind of have a picture of what it was like to be in his family when he was doing it versus when you
Yeah,
did it, right?
yeah, definitely. Yeah, it is kind of interesting.
Yeah. So, the other thing that I'm hearing a lot as a string of a belief system is about family first, and your parents both having that. I don't, and this is what's always interesting, because I had a global job for a long time, and I think different countries view working differently. So I would like to know from a national perspective in Canada how that's looked at, but also, was it something different your family was doing, and how did they adhere to it? When you say, like, when you believe families first, what did that mean to you? Or was
Yeah,
it something that was the norm, or different?
I think it's pretty much, at least in my experience, and then maybe you tend to trend towards like minds, but I
Mhm.
think most people that I know, it's family first, right? Without a doubt, it's something big part of our culture in Canada. I've lived in the United States for a while, and I wouldn't say it's remarkably different than in the
Mhm.
United States, at least in my experience. Again, there I lived in Pennsylvania for about 6 years, and but every family comes at that from a different angle. Like I left, I started commuting in 2012. My kids were in their early teens, pretty formative years. And I missed out on a lot of stuff because I was working away.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's different when the woman is working away rather than the father as well. It's just a little bit of a different dynamic, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
And it's looked at a little differently, quite honestly.
Oh, yeah. But do you think the
It's
kids look at it differently?
No, I think my kids always knew I was, I was there.
Yeah.
My kids were, sort of digitally savvy, so it was just a matter of a text or a phone call. If I
Right.
needed to come home, I was on a plane.
Mhm.
My son got quite ill at one point in time, and within 2 hours, I was on a plane and back. And that's what you need to do as parents, is be present, be available. You don't always have to be in the same room,
Mhm.
but you'd be amazed at what you can do through technology, right?
Oh,
I
it's
can't tell you
amazing.
the amount of time that I spent FaceTiming with my kids going through, an algebra assignment or an English assignment, or reading versions of assignments that they had written, and scanned and sent to me, or anything like that. You can do all those things if you put the effort into it. I mean, I can remember being in Kuala Lumpur when my son was studying for a chemistry exam, and being up in the middle of the night in Kuala Lumpur, going through chemistry problems,
Right.
right? Not that I could help a whole lot in chemistry, but just being able to help him get organized, if nothing else, right?
Right.
It's just, I think it's just a matter of how you prioritize. It's not always easy, but I think you can make it work, with the right supports. And it helps to have I have an incredible husband and a spouse who's been my partner for 30 years. And so when you've got that kind of support behind you as well, I mean, I remember
Mhm.
my husband, when I was considering taking the job, he's a physician, and spent a lot of time in our early marriage, like basically being gone because he was doing his residency. He was on call, and So I carried the load of the family responsibilities at that point in time. And I remember him saying to me in 2012, when I was contemplating this, you took responsibility of the family, for so many years. He said, let me take on that now. And you take this. This is a big career opportunity for you. And I want to support you. And he has, just,
Mhm.
to no end over the years. And,
Yeah,
having my family
communication is
around.
key there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And having my family around, and his parents have been wonderful over the years in terms of supporting us. So, it's that village. It takes a village, right? And I've been very, very lucky in my life to have those kinds of supports around me. And I think that's what's really helped me be able to focus on my career, um, and being able to do my job well.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think it's important to have those examples, especially for women, to manage jobs like this and take the
Yeah,
kinds of, not that it's any different if a man does, but like you said, it's might be viewed differently, or women have a harder time making that decision. And to understand that you need a community of support, that you
yeah.
can't do it alone, right? Like
It's
you
a
need
big
to
step,
speak
right?
up and ask
Yeah.
where you need help to do it, and make sure you have that supportive network.
Yeah, and I think that's something that as women we have an opportunity to do more of, particularly in the workplace, right?
Yeah.
I always say to people, you need to lean in, and
Hmm.
you need to, make it known that you're ready for that next step. And I'm not sure women always do that as well as
No.
men do. And I think you need to prepare, you need to be deliberate about how you prepare and how you think things through as well, when you're planning for that next step. I remember when I was, in my early 30s, my kids were young. I was staying home I was teaching part time at this point, staying home, with the kids. And I remember taking very deliberate steps to stay engaged, making sure that I was keeping current on my technical knowledge that related to the profession, staying up on current events, staying connected to the right networks, doing all of those things. So when the time came for me to decide to go back full time into the workforce, I hadn't really stepped away. I'd taken a pause, but I kept all those connections and kept up to date and done those things. And it was very deliberate on my part, so that
Hmm.
I knew at some point in time you were going to return to full-time work. And I think that's, those are things that we don't necessarily take the time. If I did look back and say, okay, to my younger self, what are some of the things you did right? I think that was one of the things I
Yes.
did. There's things I didn't do right, but I think, that's definitely one of the things that I did that made a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think it's such an important point to bring up, because s- so two things is, one is actually speaking up that you want something, but doing it in a way that's not demanding, because
Yeah,
sometimes that comes off as like, well, I deserve this, versus
yeah,
what do I need to do to get to the next level, and how can I get the help. And then the second thing that I see a lot is opportunities do come, and women will say no
yeah,
because they're missing up. They think, well, I'm not ready for that, or I've not done that kind of job before. And it's that confidence in self that everybody that goes into a new job has never done that job before. And so, how you're going to learn and use that
I
network around you to help you be successful. And it's the same thing, like you said, like you took a pause and still used your network. That community of support, whether it's your work community, your family community, your friend community, is so important and getting where you need to be.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I also think, I said earlier on in this discussion that, I have a big belief in learning, and I
Hmm.
really do. And so for my whole life, I've been in a continuous learning mode. Some of that's been informal, but some of it's been much more formal. And those learning objectives, you know, what I've been choosing those learning paths to prepare me for where I see the next stage of
Hmm.
my journey going, right? And thinking that ahead. And you're right, it's not about demanding, it's about opening yourself up for the possibilities. It's about taking chances. I went from an academic environment where I had absolutely zero management experience. I literally, got my accounting designation, moved into an academic environment, so very little management experience, to being the CEO of a small organization where I had about 4 staff, to moving into a bigger organization where I had about 60 staff, to moving into the role that I'm in now where I have about, for me personally, I have about 200 staff. And so, within my area. And so, just going from that in the space of the 10 years, there was a massive learning curve. There was so much that I didn't know about HR management, organizational design, performance management, all of these things that you've learned about, a little bit, just trying to pick it up along the way, but making sure that you're asking the questions. There are no stupid questions. You really, truly just have to ask, and you have to be interested, and you have to be, not afraid to show that you're learning. People will respect that, and they'll try to help you along the way, because, if you demonstrate a willingness to work with them, to learn, to expand, I think that, that demonstrates, your willingness to work hard.
Yeah, which is, that can sometimes be a more marketable quality than any education or anything else
Yeah,
that you are willing to do. I think it's the extra, right? Like the stuff that you learn on your own time, that it's not necessarily have to be employer led, right? Like it's to make you better in the role that you're doing. And like you said, looking into the future, making sure you're not just planning for today, but what you need in the future.
Yeah, and you know what? Nobody's perfect. You make
Right.
mistakes along the way. Everybody does.
Yeah.
I look back, and there's times when I look back and I go, wow, that was a learning moment. I
Yes.
didn't handle that well. And then rather than beating yourself up, which is your natural inclination, it's okay. What have I learned from this? And then how am I going to do it differently when I face with that same situation into the future?
Yes.
And so it's again, having the maturity to recognize you can't change, but you can do the best to fix it, or but you can't necessarily go back. So how
Right.
do you move forward?
Yeah. Which is so important, as you're moving through your career or into leadership positions, of being transparent, that,
Yeah,
I think people believe in you more, you're more authentic as a leader when you do admit those times, because everybody goes through them, right?
everybody goes through the times of doubt, or am I good enough, or oh my goodness, I wish I'd never said that, or I wish I'd never done that, or I should have done this differently. If you don't go through that, if you don't go through those points in your career, then you're not challenging yourself, right?
Right. For sure. Yeah. Well, so many good things in here, but what I like to end with is some rapid fire questions. So you pick a category. So either
Okay.
family and friends, money, spiritual, or health.
Well, we've talked a lot about family and friends, so why don't we talk about health, maybe?
Oh, nice. Okay, good. All right. So things or actions I don't have that I want as far as my health.
Since COVID happened, I don't know if anybody else is finding it that way, but there just doesn't seem to be enough time in the day anymore. And I think for me, I'm not getting to the gym enough. I'm not working out enough. I was always a fiend for running, and I'm not doing that enough. And I think that's probably what I need to do more of.
Yeah. Okay.
Got to find the time to make sure I get it into the day.
Put it on your calendar. Right.
Into the calendar, yeah.
Into the calendar. All right. Things or actions I do have that I want.
Wow, I do have that I want. I am very healthy, which is good. I take care of myself. I eat well, get lots of sleep, try to. So yeah, I think, just having that self-awareness. I'd like to pamper myself every so often. So, a trip to the spa is always is something I treat myself with on a fairly regular basis.
Yeah.
I think those are important, to take the time for yourself, right?
And
I guess
not feel guilty while you're doing it,
not feel
right?
guilty.
Like know that you earned it.
Yeah, yeah,
You're better for the people around you, right?
exactly.
Things or actions that I don't have that I don't want.
I don't have that I don't want, related to health. So
Yeah.
I don't drink a lot. I like a glass of wine every now and then. I'm not a smoker. Like I said, so I try to, I don't have those kinds of bad habits. And I also try to not sweat the small stuff. And I think that for your own mental health
Yeah.
is really important. Stuff happens and you can't control, and you can't sometimes control what other people are going to do and how other people are going to react either. So
Right.
really trying to, minimize this feeling of self-doubt or uh, concern over, something that's happened in the past that you probably can't change.
Mm-hmm. Great.
So that's focus there.
All right. Last one. Things or actions that I do have that I don't want.
That's a tough one. I think it's the amount of work right now and the intensity of the work.
Mm-hmm.
And I suspect that's largely related to, just the time we find ourselves in. I was in an interesting conversation with one of my staff today, and we were talking a little bit about the roles we find ourselves in. And she said, I'm living in one house, and in that one house, I'm a mother, I'm a spouse, I have my parents living with me, so I'm a daughter, I'm an employee, and there's no separation between any of those anymore. And I thought
Mm-hmm.
that was a very insightful
Yeah.
observation. And I would
Yeah.
say that's probably something that we're all experiencing right now as we work from home. We just don't have that separation anymore.
Yeah, very good. Very good. So anything that you want to make sure we didn't talk about today that you leave people with from this interview?
I think, be true to yourself. And it sounds trite, but it's true. Focus on the things that are important to you and, live life taking a few chances. I think that, you only go this way once. So
Mm-hmm.
you won't make it count. And maybe that's because, earlier on I said my dad had died very young. And I looked at his life and he did what he loved. He worked,
Mm-hmm.
he loved to fish, he loved to spend time with his family. So while work was important, he did everything. He traveled, he lived life to the fullest. And while it may have been short, it was certainly rich. And I think that's probably the best observation that I've ever seen
Yeah,
of the way to do things.
love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. There's some great things
Thanks.
that I'm sure people are going to learn from walking away. So
It's
thank you.
really nice talking to you.
And now for our mindful moments with this discussion with Tasha. And I'd like to start in the beginning when she talked about her father and how family was such an important example to her throughout his career and the importance that both of her parents put on it, no matter what they were doing. And I think sometimes that gets lost in our discussions when we talk about career, about how we balance everything that we have. And it's certainly not an easy discussion. And a lot of times when we talk about balance of family and career, it can sound like we can be flippant about it because we can act like it's such an easy thing to do when it actually is not. And the way that I saw Tasha really incorporating this into the conversation was her using that mantra of family first. And I think for all of us, if that is what is important to us to make sure that we are incorporating the right amount of time for our family, for our children, with whatever dreams we have in our own careers, that we do have some sort of guiding a principle that we are aligning to. And when we feel off from that, that we are aware enough to shift our focus. And I think throughout this discussion, it was really important to hear how her career and how she moved through the profession, that she was very strategic with what kind of roles she took on and the schedule that she had, and starting out in accounting but moving into being a professor and working as a professor for many years as her kids were younger, but getting involved with the profession still. So, still having an eye on what are the things that I want to learn, who do I want to network with beyond the current role or career that she was in. And I think that's important as well, that as you're moving through your career, that you're not just going to work and doing that each day, that you're also looking on how to expand yourself and that you've got some guiding light and vision into maybe what you want to do in the future, or learning about other areas to get involved with. And that was really a key thing that helped her later when she started moving out of becoming a professor, because she was getting involved with associations throughout her career as a professor. And one of the other key moments that I think that she said that was really important is really about advocating for yourself and letting people know when you're ready for additional responsibilities. So a lot of times I can coach people and talk to them and they're bored, they feel trapped and so forth, but haven't really been actively letting people know that they're ready for more responsibility. And there's a difference between complaining about your current situation or doing something about it. And when you are still putting a positive face forward, so even if you are bored or maybe you don't love every single thing that you're doing in your day, that you understand where you want to be and why you're in that role and how that role can help you achieve into the future. And so that was another really key thing of understanding how to signal to people around you that you're ready for more responsibility, that you want to be trained or get experience that might be outside of the things you do, or you're asking, that you're being proactive to ask for those responsibilities as well. Another key point that Tasha made was, in order to create success, was that if you're looking for additional responsibility and to achieve in your career, that you need to have passion around the things that you do, because if you don't love what you do, it shows to the people around you. And then work is work instead of work not feeling like work. And so it's really how you start molding your career to shift toward the things that you're passionate about, or the outside activities that you do outside of your day-to-day role that can give you that fulfillment that you need. Now, we also had a big discussion on, just as a woman, as a mother, how she was able to balance these very high level roles in the Canadian Association as her kids were in their early teens. And she gave a number of good areas of advice. One being that if you are married, and not everybody has a spouse that they can rely on, but if you are, it's really important to have the discussions that you need to have with your spouse so that you can get the support that you need. That communication is key to both people being successful, and that you aren't mad at the other, someone isn't mad at you, not understanding what you're trying to achieve. So that was a really key thing. And if it's not a spouse or a partner, who can you look at in your village of people around you that can help with support so that you can achieve the things that you need to do? The other thing was being highly aware of being present and available when you are with your children. I know for many of us that have demanding jobs, it's very hard to turn it off, because you know there's other things going on or people need you and so forth. But our kids need our full present attention. And so she made sure that if she needed to come home, she did. And communication comes into this, as well as making sure your communication lines to your supervisors and so forth is really important as well. But also, if she was traveling, which she travels a lot in her role, using FaceTime with your kids to put the effort into still being present, being there to do their homework, whatever kinds of things that you would normally do when you're at home, that you're still making time for that when you're on the road. So really, it's about being deliberate. It's about staying engaged and connected. And whether that's with your family or whether that's with other networking opportunities for yourself, that you're always staying connected to the ecosystem around you. And one of the last points that she made was about learning and how we can never stop learning, that there's never a time to be comfortable because things will always change, as we've definitely seen. But our life now in this world of technology and so forth is a matter of this agility that we need to have in our life. And to do that, we need to make sure that we are doing continuous learning, that we're choosing learning paths for our future, where you want to go, making sure you're asking questions of people, that there's never a stupid question. I mean, the worst thing is someone could say they don't know an answer to a question and then you go seek further. But it's important to be open and asking those questions and to not feel like you have to show someone that you know something that you don't, because you're actually going to go further when you learn the right way. And also just demonstrating that willingness to work hard and realize that no one is perfect. The only way that we move forward is that we're learning in the process. And so when we're transparent, we can be true to ourselves, focus on the things that are important to ourselves by doing what we love, by being present for the people around us, and taking chances with the networks that we've created and our future goals for our career. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more, so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.